All right, share the screen again. Okay. So yesterday we looked at the circumstances which can create a need for doing the kind of work that the Numberella maths books provide. So in other words, speeding up processing to improve confidence and overall ability in the subject. And what we're going to look at now is how do you decide which book to give to a student navigating the range as we see on the slide. Now, quick recap. There are two parts to the range. There's the Antonio books and there's the Tiger books. On the slide in front of you here, you see the Antonio books. These are typically the books which you'll use with younger students. They go out more frequently, and this is probably where the bulk of the work will be, is in this area. I'll discuss the Tiger books separately, but they basically continue the principles which I discussed yesterday. There's more questions and a slightly more complex layout, but we'll get into that another time. So we've got the number bonds to 0, which is 5 questions, the number bonds, sorry, the level 0, which is 5 questions, the level 1, which is 10 questions, level 2, which is 20, and level 3, which is 30 questions. Now, the number of questions is important because that plays into the concentration span or concentration stamina of the student. And it also plays into the psychology of the student, or how ready the student is for this kind of practice. It makes quite a big difference when you're looking at a book, if you're looking at 5 questions or 10 questions or 20 or 30. You can imagine that the challenge seems that much greater the more questions there are, okay? And so getting a feel for where a student lies on that line, how big of a challenge they're ready for is quite an important skill. And with this practice, we always try and err on the side of fun. And generally, we want to start someone out with something which is at the easy end of the spectrum for them. It's quite important that their first experience of these books is a fun one and one which makes them want to carry on. We need to put this firmly into the sort of gamey fun category rather than the hard work, sort of dull math category, okay? And generally, it's possible to do that as long as you select the right book. All right, so how do we select the right book? So first of all, we're going to do a verbal evaluation. Now, as you can imagine, that really just means asking them verbally a few questions that they might find within the book. You can see here is the front page of the Brain Training Assessment PDF, which can be downloaded from the website. And so you can look at this and say, right, let's just ask you a number bonds to 5 question or a number bonds to 10 question. So gauge initially where the child's at. You know, if they are 4 or 5, then number bonds to 5 might be a good place to start. If they're 6 or 7, then maybe you're looking at a number bonds to 10 question. And you're just going to ask something like 6 plus what is 10, or what plus 7 is 10? 0 plus what is 10? Try a few questions and see where they're at in terms of their answer, right? If they're able to give those answers fairly easily and you feel that they would be able to write the answers to the 10 questions, if it's a level 1, then you can proceed to a written evaluation, which is the next step. But the verbal is very much sort of no pressure. We're just gently feeling our way into this and trying to work out where they are in the grand scheme of things. Once we've established that, we go to our written evaluation. And this is where you get them for the first time to write out their answers in the boxes. As you can see on the slide here, we've got our thresholds. So we're actually looking at a level 2 book here with 20 questions. So the ants at 40, the gold at 50, the silver at 110, and the bronze at 150. You'd probably encourage the child to circle the bronze goal. And then, you know, we're going to get our stopwatch out and we're going to see how it goes. During the written evaluation, you want to keep a close eye on them. Okay, it's not a time to sort of sit back and wait for them to get on with their work, and when they shout finish, you press end on the stopwatch. It's very important when working with these books and with children that you actually concentrate just as much as they are on the work that's happening. You want to be, if possible, looking at the answers as they go down. I say if possible because sometimes children kind of lean on a desk or block your view. That's not ideal, but if they're habitually sort of leaning down like this, you might want to sit the other side. You want to try and be in a position where you're able to see their writing. Look at the answers as they go down. Be aware that if they get stuck, you might want to step in and help. You don't want to leave someone hanging for too long. And if they're getting stuck too often, then it may be that you've chosen the wrong exercise and you need to go down one, you need to go easier. So just be conscious of how they're getting on in the space and ready to step in and help if necessary. Remember, this is meant to be a fun experience for them, and it will be fun as long as they're able to do the majority of the answers fairly easily. Okay. So just to summarize that, really, it's not an exam. We're not trying to, we're not trying to put them under sort of unpleasant conditions. Ideally, we want them to enjoy things. So when you're deciding which book to use with a student, really make sure that they're going to have a good time, that they can already do the vast majority of the questions in there. That's very important. Okay, and finally, we've got this no practice is bad practice. So what that means is, even if you're practicing something which you can basically already do, and you are speeding that thing up, that is a good thing, okay? A lot of what this is about is, it's not actually about breaking new ground and teaching new stuff. It's about speeding up what's already there, okay? Because as soon as you sped it up, it becomes easier to access for the child and therefore easier to use in sort of real life situations like the classroom or a test, okay? So even if they're working sort of within their comfort zone and the objective is speeding up, that's a good thing. Now, you can flip that statement the other way around. No practice is bad practice, okay? We want to make sure that practice is happening. And to not be doing practice is of itself bad practice, okay? So that's just a flip on that sentence, which I thought was quite nice. Right. Any questions at that point about how to pick the right book?
All good.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm now going to move on to, student types. Okay. People respond to the spotlight in different ways. Ultimately, when you're doing a brain training book like this, you are putting someone in the spotlight, okay? They are performing, there's a clock running, there's an objective set. So it's a bit like running a race or, doing anything where there's no avoiding the reality of the moment, okay? And different people respond to this in different ways. And I thought it might be useful for everybody just to look at a few of the types of student that I've encountered in my time teaching, so that should you encounter them yourselves, you are forewarned, right? Forewarned is forearmed, as the saying goes. So first of all, we've got the eager beavers. Now, eager beavers is hopefully what you get most of the time. All right, if you pick your book correctly, you give them something that they can do, they enjoy doing it, they get their sticker, you praise them for getting a personal best, and it's a nice fact that the first time you do anything, it is a personal best, right? So from the moment the practice starts, it's an access to praise, and that's a very important part of this. Now, you may find with an eager beaver that they want to carry on, right? And that's great. It's one of the best feelings in teaching when you're giving someone something which is really beneficial to them, and they absolutely love it and want to do more of it. It's a lovely moment in teaching, and really you can let them run with it. You'd be looking out for things like, have I chosen the right book? right? If you've given them a 10-question book and they're kind of knocking it off in 25 seconds or 20 seconds, you might be thinking, yeah, they may be able to go up a level here. They might be ready for more like a 20-question challenge. But as I said at the beginning, it's fine if they're getting started and they're really having a great time. Then it's fine to err on the side of caution in that respect. Look out for concentration fade. All right, just like if we were sprinting, presumably everyone's done that at some point in their lives. If we were doing sprinting and I ask you to do 10 sprints, then your first, second, and third sprints would probably feel okay, and then your legs would start to feel a little bit tired. And at some point, they'd be full of lactic acid and you couldn't go on anymore. Now, your brain is a little bit like that. The first one you do that is totally fresh, you feel like you could do a million of them and it wouldn't make any difference. But after a few, your brain can start to feel tired as well. And what happens then is, performances start to fall away. And so if someone's started off by getting, as I've said, the first 4 exercises in the book, if you do a different style, those are 4 different personal bests. Okay, 4 opportunities for praise. If the concentration starts to fade a little bit and the times start to go down, you might want to call a halt. Okay, you might want to say, all right, listen, you've done really well, but we've got other things to do now. We need to play a game of Numberella Deluxe, or we need to do, a little bit of work on something else. And it's a great idea to leave them wanting to do more still, right? Don't wait until they're so knackered that they don't want to carry on. Yeah. I usually call a halt at 4 exercises in one lesson. That is, for some students, they still want to carry on. And if they really twist my arm, I'll let them carry on. But like I said before, that's a fantastic position to be in, right? Just try and manage things so that they still want to do more. Now, you may find, and I'll come to the different types, you may find that they don't want to do 4, in which case that's a slightly different discussion. But the point about eager beavers is run with them, but don't let them run until they're blown, to give it a sort of horse racing analogy. Okay. Now, next, divas. Now, divas are interesting. They don't turn up that often. And understand that when I'm showing you these examples, I have students that I either have now or have had in the past in mind. Okay. So I can think of 2 divas, during the 10 or so years that I've been using these books. So it's not a particularly common category. However, what happens with a diva is that they will generally talk to you about whether it's really necessary for them to do this practice. Okay. And the way you need to handle that is at the back of your attitude is, yes, it is absolutely necessary for you to do this practice. But you need to be willing to humor them, go with their discussion, and you need to be relaxed enough to never let it become confrontational, but just sort of gently determined to lead them towards the practice. And divas are not people who are ultra pressure sensitive, which is a category I'm going to come to in a bit. You know that they're going to be fine doing the practice, and they know that they're going to be fine doing the practice. It's more like, they're not sure they want to do it right now, or is it really necessary for them to do it at all? These kind of arguments, they can be a little bit wearying, but you have to try and keep it light. Don't get sort of personally invested in whether they do it or not. Don't start feeling like it's, an insult to you if they don't do it. But this is quite a skill, is sort of just bringing people towards the practice. Generally, when they get to it, they're fast and they're good and they do well. Okay. And, over time, the sort of diva-ishness of a student can diminish as they start to get used to the program and they start to enjoy it more and see the benefits of it. Okay, but just be aware that sometimes this can happen. Right, now, I've called this category optimists. Okay, so this is the category who will do the exercise, but if they hit a question that they don't know, they may just skip it. All right, and they may skip it and come back to it later, or they may just skip it completely and sort of not be too bothered about whether it's right or not. Now, the books, the Antonio series, doesn't contain time penalties for wrong answers. Okay, the Tiger series does. You get a 5-second penalty for a wrong answer in the Tiger series. But in the Antonio series, there is no penalty. So in other words, you could rattle through it. You could get all of the questions wrong. You would get no time penalty. You'd in theory have gone fast and therefore, still qualify for your ANT medal, but actually you got 0 out of 10. All right. Now, obviously, under those circumstances, it's sort of null and void. So there has to be like a code of conduct when the students are doing these exercises that basically says, you have to try your hardest to get the answers right. Now, generally, young children, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, they don't have the complexity, if you like, the strategy to deliberately get the answers wrong so that they're going to get the medal anyway. It almost never arises, but sometimes a child may come up with the idea that it doesn't matter if they don't fill in the answer. And then you have to look at it as well. Why aren't they able to fill this in? Is the difficulty level too high, or do I need to do some remedial work behind the scenes and look at why they aren't able to get that particular question? If it's addition, then have they got a fundamental misconception behind the scenes? If it's a multiplication, do they have an adequate structure behind? Are they able to do their multiples? So in other words, if you see a question type coming up again and again that they're skipping, then you need to do some teaching on it. But just be aware that there's some students who will skip questions, and yeah, you have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. All right, next, the chillers. Now, as you might imagine, chillers are people who are not really trying as hard as they could in the course of the exercise. Okay. Now, much like in athletics or weightlifting or anything like that, anything where you're doing an exercise which is designed to improve your performance and improve your strength, if you don't practice at full capacity, at or near full capacity, then you won't actually get stronger. And the same goes for brain training. So if you have a student who is coasting through, someone else is joining the room, just give me a second. Welcome, Thomas. We're just in the middle of it. So yeah, listen in and we can catch up at the end. So if you have someone who's not working at their full capacity, then you have to look at the motivational structure around the practice. Why would someone not try as hard as they can? Okay. Now, it's an interesting question, and there's not one answer to it. There are various possibilities. One may be that they don't believe that they're good enough to do well. Okay. Now, I do have a student who's fitted into that category, and they've had, they've had issues. They've had mental health issues. Okay, and under those circumstances, you need probably to drop the level right back down again so that they can do something that they can succeed at easily to start building that confidence back up. And actually, that's exactly what I did with this student. We dropped back down from the Tiger range to the Antonio range, built up a bit of speed, a bit of confidence, and then recently he's right back up in the Tiger range and pretty much hitting the same highs that he was hitting, before his crisis. So that's one reason that someone might perform below their potential. Yeah, another reason might be that they just don't want to work that hard, right? They don't want to give that maximum effort, And you might need to look at the motivational superstructure. Okay, so if you're doing this in a tuition context, which obviously most of you would be, then you'd be looking at, can you use the league? Can you use the promise of ant coins, the promise of moving up places in the league to get them to try that little bit harder, to get them excited, you know, give them something short term that they really want to go for. For some students, that works pretty well. Generally, the older a student gets, the harder it is to motivate them with stickers and ant coins. And sometimes you might need to get a big extrinsic motivator, like, you know, that what might a sort of 13-year-old really want? They might want a Fitbit, yeah, something like that. Quite a big prize that the parents will obviously have to step in to provide, but you can sort of dangle that in front of them and say, right, listen, this is what's waiting for you when you hit this level. And sometimes that can work. That can get them into it. They start trying hard. And remember what I said yesterday about the habit of maximum performance. When you get used to trying your hardest, it tends to be something that you will default to. And if you're working with somebody who hasn't got to that space yet, then we're just trying to nudge them towards the point where they're giving everything every time they practice. Okay. Now, finally, we have, well, not finally, actually, we have the fragile, the people who suffer from extreme pressure sensitivity. I've had a couple of students who fall into this category over time. Now, it may be that this practice is not right for some students, okay? I have to say it's 2 in 100 maybe, so it's a very, very small minority. But you have to be aware that for some people, the pressure can just be too much. And, you know, under those circumstances, it may not even be right for them to be attempting tutoring. You know, they may need psychological help, in which case, you know, that's a different discussion. If someone is extremely pressure sensitive, one thing that we can do is just look for that point where they're confident enough to handle a little bit of pressure. Okay. Now, it may be that, you know, the book is off the table and you're actually just looking at doing things like counting with them. And a way to relieve pressure is to be in the exercise with them. Okay. So one thing that I do with students is I just call it ping pong. So if we were doing, say, multiples of 2, I would go 2, they would go 4, I would go 6, and so on. So, you know, as the tutor, you're part of the practice with them. And this helps it feel like it's more like sort of holding their hand. And then once you're in that space, you can begin to introduce timing into that space. Okay, so you're sort of in it together and you're working to get that personal best together. And so you're just very gently introducing this concept of performing under pressure. And remember, performing under pressure is something that you're almost certainly going to have to do at some point in your life. It's a very, very important skill set to develop. If you're at school, it's going to be the most obvious one is, you know, you sit down in an exam hall, you've got an hour to do your exams. And by the time you're getting to GCSEs, those exams are pretty important. They play a role in how your life is going to go. And obviously A-levels to a greater extent. And finals at university, you know, huge pressure on those exams because they're going to decide how much money you make in some ways, right? They're really going to affect the outcome of your life. So I think it's very important to remember that getting used to performing under pressure is massive, all right? And so this practice that we're talking about here, which is, you know, much less complex, obviously, than sort of those exams that I've been mentioning, it's a huge service to someone if you can help them to get used to performing under pressure, to get used to that feeling of pressure, maybe even starting to thrive under it, starting to use it as a lever to access maximum performance, okay? So if you are with someone who's very pressure sensitive, you know, the temptation can be to step away, but just remember that if they're very pressure sensitive in this environment, they're going to remain pressure sensitive in every environment, okay? And that ultimately is not a good thing for them in the course of their life. So just very gently trying to get them a little bit more comfortable with it, to the point that maybe they're going to count in multiples of 2 by themselves to 24 and get a time at the end of it. If we can get them there, and then we can get them to do it again and go a little bit faster, and then next week a little bit faster, we're just nudging them into that zone where achieving personal bests starts to make them feel good. All right. And when you've hooked up that, that sort of release of dopamine, when you get the praise and you feel good about the effort that you just made, at that point, maybe they're ready to start writing the answers by themselves in the books, and they're on the ladder. They're on that sort of the inevitable path towards high performance, high achievement under pressure. But if you have a student who's in this category, you have to be super careful, and so take it session by session. Now, final category, error makers. Now, if you've chosen your book correctly, the student should be able to get the vast majority of the answers right without help. Okay. However, it may happen that a student, despite theoretically knowing the content of the book, is not able to score, 18 out of 20 or better, 8 out of 10 or better. That's sort of what we're looking at as a pass mark, really. Maybe they're coming with 40, with 6 out of 10 or 14 out of 20, something like that. And, they might get 5 times 5 is 25 right in one exercise, and then 2 exercises later, they might get it wrong. And you're thinking, well, how is it that you got it right that time and wrong this time? And the answer is most likely that they've got some kind of working memory issue, or they may have a multiplicity of methods which behind the scenes are confusing them and preventing them from getting the answer straight away. Now, I've recently been working with a student who falls into this camp. He definitely has working memory issues. He's sort of, his entire school career has been struggling. And what's been interesting is we've done the times tables 1 to 5 book. Now he's 12, so I started him out on a level 3 book. I realized that book it wasn't doing anything for him. He wasn't improving, so I dropped him down a level. We came to we got to pretty much the right level. We did a 2, 5 to 10 book first. We got his accuracy right up in the 2s, 5s, and 10s. And then we moved on to a 1 to 5. Now he's done that 1 to 5 book 3 times. And he's now at the point where his performance has dramatically improved. He's getting 20 out of 20 for probably 90% of the exercises. And his times are times 2 or times 3 faster than they were in the first book. So it's been a very gratifying experience to watch that journey. But nevertheless, I've never had to do that with another student. Okay, this is a unique situation. And as with some of these other types I've been discussing, you have to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. But, basically, it just really brings home the idea that you have to find the right level for the student. You have to be patient, and don't be afraid of doing the same thing again, and just waiting it out, waiting for these things just to start to slot into place. This student was a good example of someone who had too many strategies. He had a finger strategy for anything times 9. He had a doubling strategy for things like 7 plus 7. He had the facts remembered, but actually they weren't serving him in terms of how to get a sort of a uniform approach to finding answers. So there was a few things to unpick there from a teaching perspective. Now, that has gone on longer than I anticipated. So we're at the half-hour mark. I think I'm going to stop there. The next thing that I'll talk about is teaching methodologies to support these books. But I think that's probably a subject for another webinar. So at that point, does anybody have any questions? Let me just end the share. Yeah, any thoughts or questions? No, everyone good? Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to make these recordings available. Now, I'd anticipated that 2 webinars would be enough to cover everything I wanted to say regarding the books. Obviously, that's not been the case. So I will share with you another webinar date, and we can reconvene for that. All right. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I'll share the links with you all. So if you want to review what I've been on about today, you can. And look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks. See you next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.